Hello and welcome. And if you have ever stared at a page and felt nothing stick, if you have ever told yourself you are just not a math person, if you have ever worked hard yet watched your results stay flat, then this story and system are meant for you today. You are about to see how a real engineer rewired her learning and built a simple method you can use right now. And the proof is in her journey from languages to engineering and to one of the world's most popular learning teachers. Stay with me, because you will get a practical plan you can apply this week while also training your ear with clear English that fits your daily life and goals. Let's start with the person behind the method and then move step by step through a system that mixes focus, rest, and smart practice to change how you learn. Barbara Oakley was born in Lodi, California, and she moved many times as a child, which shaped a flexible mind that learned to adapt fast. She first trained in languages and earned a degree in Slavic languages and literature at the University of Washington, while serving in the U.S. Army, which means her early strength was words, not numbers. She worked with Russian at sea on Soviet fishing trawlers as a translator and later as a radio operator in Antarctica, a path that sounds like a novel more than a lab manual. After the Army, she set herself a challenge and asked if she could refit her brain for math and engineering. And she went back to study electrical engineering to understand the equipment she had used in the field. She completed a bachelor's in electrical engineering in 1986, later earned a master's, then a PhD in systems engineering, and became a professor at Oakland University, together with neuroscientist Terence Sejnowski. She built and taught a massive open online course called Learning How to Learn that reached learners around the world. And she wrote a Mind for Numbers about mastering math and science, even if school once went badly. Here's a brutal truth. Many people fail, not because they lack talent, but because they use the wrong rhythm of effort and rest, like trying to sprint a marathon with no water. Here's what most people never realize. Great learners do not only push hard, they switch modes, like a camera swaps between zoom and wide view to get a sharp picture. Think of your attention as a spotlight when you focus, and as a lantern when you relax. And both are needed to see the whole scene without missing the path ahead. Barbara's life shows this switch in action, from words to circuits, and from field posts to classrooms. And it proves that identity is not fixed when you use the right tools. Now let's walk through a system you can start today. And we will use simple metaphors for each tool, so they stay in your mind like clear images on a shelf. Step 1 is focus sprints. And the core tool here is the Pomodoro technique, which is like setting a kitchen timer to boil an egg, and refusing to open the pot early so steam can do its job. The problem is painful and familiar. You sit down to study and drift into tabs, chats, and snacks, and your effort leaks out like water in a cracked bucket. Let me explain why this happens. Your brain loves novelty, so it flips to quick rewards, while the hard task still needs steady heat to reach a boil. Imagine a lighthouse beam that turns slowly in the fog, and each time it turns away, you lose the target and must find it again, which wastes time and energy. That is exactly what happens when you keep checking your phone, because each switch forces your mind to reload the task and rebuild context. A practical example. You plan to learn calculus at 7 p.m. You open the book, then you answer a message, then you look up a video, and soon 1 hour is gone with little to show. Why? Because you never stayed in one lane long enough to warm up the engine. So friction ate the fuel and the car barely moved. Now imagine this. You set a timer for 25 minutes. You pick one clear task like 10 problems from 2 sections. You put the phone in another room, and you mark a checkbox when the bell rings. You take a short 5-minute break to stand, breathe, sip water. Then you do another 25-minute sprint, and you repeat this 3 or 4 times as a tight loop. Now your brain gets the message that this block matters, and momentum builds like a flywheel that stores energy with each push. So effort feels lighter over time. From now on, whenever you want deep progress, set a short, non-negotiable timer. Define one task. Remove cues for distraction, and log each sprint like a pilot logs flight hours. Because what gets measured gets repeated. And a clean loop beats vague wishes every single night you show up. Here is the secret that many high performers use. They protect the first sprint of the day like a sacred meeting. So the tone is set before noise arrives. Step 2 is diffuse breaks, and the key idea is that stepping away is not quitting. It is switching gears. So the engine does not burn out and the pistons do not seize. The problem is shocking because it feels noble. You grind for hours, but quality drops and mistakes grow, like writing with a dull pencil that tears the page. Let me explain why. Hard focus locks neural circuits into a narrow groove, and without release the groove becomes a rut. So you repeat old patterns and miss new paths. Imagine your brain as a snowfield, and your first sled path is fast. But if you keep using it, you never explore the hill, and you miss the best line just a few meters away. That is exactly what happens in long, stuck sessions. You keep trying the same approach even when it fails, because your mind is trapped in the beaten track. A practical example, you face a proof and stare at it for an hour, and every attempt loops back to the same wrong step, while frustration grows like ice in your chest. Why? Because no fresh signals arrive to shake the pattern, and no space opens for remote ideas to join the scene. Now imagine this. After 1 or 2 focus sprints, you take a real break. You walk outside, wash dishes, or do light stretches, and you do not check feeds that pull you into new puzzles. You give your attention a wide frame, like switching from a microscope to a window view. And you let weak signals link in the background without force. Now you return and try again. And often the next step feels obvious, like a key you suddenly notice on the table you had cleaned 2 minutes ago. From now on, insert short, clean breaks after each sprint, and plan one longer break after a cycle. So the diffuse mode can do quiet repair and creative search, because insight often arrives when you stop grabbing at it. The way a shy cat comes close when you sit still and breathe soft. Here is what most people never realize. Rest is not the opposite of work. It is part of the work when the job is learning and problem solving. Step 3 is interleaving, which means you mix related skills in one session, like throwing different balls in practice, so your hands learn patterns, not one script. The problem is painful, yet common. Block practice feels good because it is smooth, but it builds a performance illusion and fails on real tasks that demand flexible transfer. Let me explain why. The brain builds stronger maps when it has to pick the right tool among options. So switching forces detection, not just repetition, which grows skill you can use anywhere. Imagine a toolbox where each tool has a bright label, and you practice choosing the right one for wood, for metal, for plastic. So your reach becomes automatic in the moment of need. That is exactly what interleaving does for math, coding, or language, because you learn to match problem types with methods under small pressure. A practical example, instead of 20 identical derivatives, you mix limits, derivatives, and chain rule items, and you shuffle them so you must read the problem before moving your hand. Why? Because recognition before action is the root of expert performance, and interleaving trains that moment of choice until it feels natural. Now imagine this. You plan a 90-minute study block with 3 small sets from 3 topics. You rotate sets every 20 to 25 minutes, and you keep notes on what fooled you. You mark tricky types with a star, and revisit them in the next session. So spacing and mixing work together, like salt and heat, in a good soup. Now your results rise on tests that do not follow the textbook order, which is how real life always behaves when the stakes are high. From now on, design mixed sets for practice, and test yourself on selection, not just execution. So your skill survives outside the safe lab of your desk, because the world rarely hands you clean categories, and your mind must learn to sort before it solves. Let me tell you something no one talks about. Analogies are not just cute images. They are bridges that carry weight across a gap when you cannot jump it alone. Step 4 is the analogy engine, and the term engine is a good metaphor here, because an engine takes one kind of motion and turns it into another that moves you forward. The problem is subtle. Abstract ideas drift like clouds, and your hands cannot hold them. So you need a concrete hook to keep them in place while you work. Let me explain why. Memory sticks when new ideas link to old networks with many ties, like tying a boat to several posts, not one, so waves cannot pull it away. Imagine data structures as closets, arrays as rows of boxes, linked lists as a chain of lockers, and trees as a hallway with many branches where each door leads to more rooms. That is exactly how analogies work. They give shape and motion to an idea, so you can test it, compare it, and fix it when it breaks in your hands. A practical example: current in a circuit is like water in pipes. Voltage is pressure, and resistance is a narrow pipe. And with this picture, you can predict what happens when you add a resistor. Why? Because the brain loves stories about familiar objects, and a good mapping turns symbols into scenes where cause and effect are visible. Now imagine this. Each time you meet a new term, you write one plain analogy in your notes, and you underline the limits of the analogy, so you do not force it beyond its range. You share your analogy with a friend and ask them to break it. Then you fix it or replace it, which trains a flexible mind that can model and revise fast. Now your understanding becomes portable. Like a travel kit, you can carry into new problems without fear of getting lost. From now on, do not pass a definition without a picture, and make analogies your default tool until clarity appears without strain. Because the shortest path to depth is often through a simple door your senses already know well. Here is one of the most powerful techniques in history: teach to learn, and this is the spirit of the Feynman style. Explain as if to a curious child, and expose the holes you must fill. Barbara's course and book made these ideas accessible to millions, and her own shift from languages to engineering shows that methods beat myths about fixed talent. So here is your quick field drill right now. Pause and try this 3-step loop and feel the change. Step 1. Set a 25-minute timer and do 5 mixed problems from 2 topics you studied this week, and write 1 sentence that names the method you used on each. Step 2. Take a 5-minute walk and describe out loud your method for the hardest problem, as if teaching a friend, and build 1 analogy to make it vivid. Step 3. Return and do 2 more items that match your weak spot, then star them and plan a mixed set for tomorrow. Did you feel the difference as your focus rose, your mind cleared, and the method became a story you can repeat, not just a move you copy? Here is what most people never realize: consistency beats intensity, and small loops done daily beat rare heroic sessions that leave you tired and burned out. To close this chapter of our session, remember the real person behind the system: an engineer and educator who proved that a brain can change with the right practice and rhythm. Barbara Oakley's path ran from Slavic languages to electrical engineering, and on to a professorship at Oakland University. And her teaching reached global scale through learning how to learn with Terence Sednowski. She wrote a mind for numbers to help non-specialists build math and science skill. And her message is simple: use focus sprints, protect breaks, mix practice, and think in analogies you can test. If you apply these steps for 4 weeks, you can double your recall on mixed tests and feel calmer under pressure. And more than that, you become a builder of methods, not a victim of mood. Remember, this lesson is not only about learning faster, it is also about growing your English by hearing clear steps with concrete images you can hold in your mind as you study. If this already helps, subscribe now, because here we do not just collect tips, we build systems you can trust when life gets noisy and the stakes are high. Want the full 45-minute deep dive with more drills and case studies? Type continuing, and we will keep going with spaced retrieval, error logs, and test rehearsal that lock the gains in place. Step 5 is spaced retrieval, and the core idea is to let memory grow between visits like a plant that gets water, sun, and time, not a flood in one day that washes soil away. The problem is brutal because cramming feels productive, yet most of it fades by morning like footprints on a windy beach. Let me explain why this happens. The brain strengthens, traces when you recall after a delay. So the act of pulling the idea up is the workout that builds the muscle you need. Imagine a library where books are shelved deeper each time you search and find them, and spacing your searches makes the path stronger and easier to follow next time. That is exactly what spaced repetition does. because time gaps signal importance and retrieval cements the link across contexts you care about. A practical example: you learn 3 formulas today, then you test yourself tomorrow, then 3 days later, then a week later, and each recall makes the next recall faster and more stable. Why? Because spacing reduces interference and forces attention to the essence. So you keep the signal and drop the noise as days pass. Now imagine this. You build a tiny deck of 10 key items for the week. You quiz yourself aloud until you can answer fast. Then you move hard cards forward a little and easy cards back a lot. You keep each quiz short and stop on a win to store a positive tag. So the next session starts with momentum and ends before fatigue eats your will. From now on, seed each study block with 3 to 5 retrieval prompts you write yourself and spread them across days, not hours. So memory works while you sleep and live, because the spacing effect is a law of learning, not a trend, and it rewards patience with strength you can use on real tasks. Step 6 is the error log. And this is your black box recorder after each flight, where you write what failed, why it failed, and what you will try next time in one line. The problem is painful and common. Illusions of competence grow when you look, nod, and move on without testing. So you feel skilled while gaps stay open. Let me explain why this happens. Passive review lights up familiarity, but not ability. And the warm feeling it brings hides the cold truth that you cannot do the move alone yet. Imagine tightening bolts by tapping them with a finger instead of a wrench. They sound okay, but under vibration, the engine shakes apart on the road. That is exactly what happens when you skim a solution and say, got it. Because the first pressure test in the wild exposes the loose parts you never torqued down. A practical example: you miss a sign in a calculus problem and apply the wrong method. So you note the miss, write the correct cue and fix in 10 words, and tag the problem type for next interleave set. Why? Because explicit notes change future perception. So your eye learns to catch the cue that matters before your hand starts to write. Now imagine this. After each sprint you record 3 items, 1 mistake, 1 method, 1 analogy, and you keep the log short so you can read it in under a minute tomorrow. You use the log to build your next mixed set. So practice attacks weak links first while your strong links maintain tone without stealing time. From now on, end sessions with a 2-minute log ritual and let the log drive what you study, not mood or guilt. So your path stays objective and sane. Because improvement lives where errors are named, not where they are hidden under more pages and more coffee. Step 7 is test rehearsal, and this means you train the way you will fight, with conditions that match the event, so your skills transfer under pressure. The problem is shocking because it is subtle. You practice with notes open and music on. Then you meet silence and a clock, and your brain feels like a swimmer thrown into cold water at night. Let me explain why this happens. Retrieval under constraints is a skill by itself, and tests can teach if you use them as workouts, not just as judgments after the fact. Imagine a stage where lights go hot, and the room goes quiet, and a performer who rehearsed with noise now hears their own breath for the first time and loses the beat. That is exactly what passive study creates, a rehearsal gap that kills performance when conditions flip, which is why deliberate mock tests pay so well. A practical example: you set a 30-minute timer, you silence devices, you clear the desk, you pick a mix set, you write answers on paper, then you grade with keys and your error log open like a coach's clipboard. Why? Because testing effect turns struggle into learning, and comparison with a model answer shows patterns you can fix next time with specific moves, not hope. Now imagine this. You schedule 1 rehearsal every 3rd day in the week before the exam, and you keep each one short and sharp to avoid dread while you build control and speed. You rotate topics, track errors, and rebuild your next set from misses. So each rehearsal makes the next one smaller, easier. From now on, treat short tests as tools that teach, not as verdicts, and make rehearsal the safe lab where failure is data, and confidence is earned, because the brain grows from effortful recall. And every honest attempt plants roots you will stand on when it counts. Step 8 is sleep and reset. And here the rule is simple. Sleep is the night shift for learning that files, links, and cleans the shop floor so you are ready to build again. The problem is brutal because the culture praises late nights, yet foggy days after cut deep into accuracy and make simple tasks feel like climbing with sand in your boots. Let me explain why. Sleep consolidates memory and clears metabolic waste. So depth grows when you respect the cycle instead of stealing from it. Imagine a workshop where the crew skips cleanup. Sawdust covers the tools, and in the morning nothing fits right, which slows every cut and every joint you try to make. That is exactly what chronic short sleep does to your mind. It leaves residue that dulls focus and blocks insight that would emerge if you rested well. A practical example: you end your last sprint 90 minutes before bed. You take a slow walk or a warm shower, you dim screens, and you let ideas settle instead of chasing one more video. Why? Because calm pre-sleep lowers arousal and invites deeper cycles that serve learning better than one more tired page in the dark. Now imagine this. You pair your spaced sessions with steady sleep windows, and you notice that recall feels easier and mood more stable by the end of the week. You protect mornings for your hardest sprint when you can, because fresh hours compound like interest on the time you bank well. From now on, plan studies around sleep, not against it, and let rest be the lever that lifts your results with less force from willpower, because a sharp blade beats a dull one, and sleep is how you sharpen, without grinding your edge down to nothing. Step 9 is the weekly map, and this is where you stack the tools into a simple loop you can sustain through real life and changing schedules. The map is clear. 3 days with 2 focus sprints, plus 1 rehearsal, 2 days with 1 focus sprint plus spaced retrieval, and 2 days that are lighter for review and rest. Let me explain why this balance works. Spacing across the week gives your brain time to build. Retrieval wakes knowledge up before it fades, and rehearsal keeps you honest about what you can really do. Imagine a gardener who rotates water and sun across beds and checks each plant by touch, not by memory, so the garden stays healthy without daily floods. That is exactly how the weekly map protects you. It avoids heroic streaks and crash days, and it fits around work, family, and all the noise of normal life. A practical example: on Monday you sprint twice with interleaving. On Tuesday you do 1 sprint and a short retrieval set. On Wednesday you rehearse. On Thursday you log errors and fix 1 theme. On Friday you interleave again. On Saturday you interleave again. On Saturday you rest, walk, and plan. Why? Because rhythm beats bursts, and a plan you can keep will always beat a plan you admire for 1 week and then drop. Now imagine this. You print a 1-page tracker with boxes for sprints, breaks, retrieval, rehearsal, sleep, and error logs, and you check boxes like a pilot before takeoff. You only need to keep this for 4 weeks to feel the floor rise under your feet, because space cycles stack and retrieval builds speed you can trust under stress. From now on, run the weekly map, adjust for your reality, and let the method be boring and powerful while results get exciting on their own. Because systems carry you when mood dips, and this system is small, durable, and proven in both labs and living rooms. Let's tie the thread back to the real person who sparked this path, because a story gives courage when the plan feels new. Barbara Oakley teaches learning how to learn with Terence Signovsky, where you meet focused and diffuse modes, chunking, illusions of competence, interleaving, and the serious value of sleep in learning. Millions have enrolled across versions of the course, which shows how universal these tools are for art, code, math, and more. The modules walk you through mental modes, procrastination fixes, memory building, and how to make practice permanent through smart design, not just willpower, so you do not burn out. The same ideas you used here sit inside that structure. So if you want more depth, you can explore the lessons and interviews that expand on the science and put it in daily close. Right now, do a quick micro drill to lock the gains. Then feel how it changes your next move. Close your notes, set a 5-minute timer, and write 3 questions you expect on your next test without looking at any source. Answer from memory, then check and log errors in 1 line each, and finish by creating 1 analogy for the hardest idea. Put those questions on your spaced list and schedule 1 rehearsal in 2 days, because timing is part of the tool, not an afterthought to add later. If you complete this tiny drill twice this week, you will have built 2 retrieval sets and 2 rehearsals without adding extra hours, which is how small loops grow big results. Let's review what you now have in your hands. So the map is clear in your mind before you go. Step 1 was focus sprints with a timer, 1 task, clean cues, and logs to build momentum you can feel. Step 2 was diffuse breaks that let patterns rearrange without force so insight can arrive when you stop grabbing at it. Step 3 was interleaving, so your eye learns to choose the right tool before your hand begins to move. Step 4 was the analogy engine, so abstract ideas gain weight and shape, and you can test them like objects in your hand. Step 5 was spaced retrieval, so memory grows, roots between visits and performance stays strong when life gets noisy. Step 6 was the error log that turns failure into a compass. Instead of a bruise you hide under more pages. Step 7 was test rehearsal, so practice and performance finally match, and pressure becomes part of training, not a surprise. Step 8 was sleep and reset, so the night shift does its work and your days stay sharp without extremes. Step 9 was the weekly map, so all the parts move together like gears in a simple quiet machine. If you apply these steps for 4 weeks, you will complete 3 spaced cycles and at least 12 retrieval sessions. And most people feel recall become faster and calmer within that time window. More than that, you start to become a builder of systems who adapts under change, which is the identity that carries through careers, projects, and exams alike. Remember, this session was not only about learning smarter, it was also a live workout in clear English, with concrete images and precise terms explained in simple ways. Every sentence was designed to train focus and language together, so your ear and method grow as one without splitting attention. If this gave you tools you can use today, subscribe now, because here we do not chase hacks. We wire habits into place so results compound quietly. Tap subscribe and bring a friend to your next sprint, because systems love company and courage grows when a team shows up and builds together.